How did we go from this to this, evolve from this to this, and get this from that? The most iconic and defining thing about a superhero is their costume. It's what's most recognizable and helps define who they are as heroes. It tells you what their powers are, how they fight, where they're from, and what they believe in. But just like how a superhero's costume helps define who they are, the superhero costume can also define the era that they are in. Every superhero's costume has evolved in some shape or form, from bright and stretchy to dark and gritty. Superhero costumes have changed throughout every era. Just like many other fashion trends, many of them come in cycles. Trends come onto the stage in an instant and define a look for a generation, only to leave just as abruptly and later be looked down upon with disdain. Only for that same trend that came and left to come right back around again, this time being lauded for its vintage and nostalgic quality. This is what's now happening to superhero costumes. The bright and vibrant comic booky look of the early superhero costumes are making a comeback. We are entering a new era of superhero fashion that will define it for a generation. Look at Wolverine's costume in Deadpool and Wolverine. This is a callback to the classic Wolverine look of the earlier comics. Throughout Hugh Jackman's run as the clawed hero, the look of his wardrobe has been toned down from the bright yellow and blue from the comics and has become more grounded in each X-Men installment. In the first X-Men movie, they even made a joke about this.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Got him!
In Deadpool and Wolverine, they leaned back into this retro look. Now I know this has been explained as Logan's costume being designed by his universe's X-Men, but this leans into my point. Now with the new multiverse craze in comic book movies, studios are more willing to play around with the costumes rather than trying to keep the same look for all of the heroes across one universe. This leads me into another thing I've noticed that leads me to believe this inevitable change in superhero fashion is here to stay. Two of the biggest superhero movies of the year are both releasing this summer. James Gunn's Superman and the MCU's Fantastic Four, First Steps. Now I don't think it's an overstatement to say that these two films are the most important comic book films in years. Marvel's multiverse saga post-Avengers Endgame has been a total disappointment to say the least. This Fantastic Four movie will be a chance to right the ship and will be the beginning of the newest phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And these aren't just any superheroes. The Fantastic Four are one of the most recognizable and beloved superheroes of all time. They became a cornerstone of Marvel after the comics were created in the 1960s. Susan Storm, Reed Richards as Mr. Fantastic, the Human Torch, The Thing. These are some of the most iconic characters in comic books. And what is most recognizable about them is their matching blue uniforms, or blue pants / shorts for The Thing.
Thing. Motherfucker. Looks just like the Thing.
The suits are made up of unstable molecules, which allow them to adapt to each of the Four's powers, but most of all, they're matching to show that the Fantastic Four is a team, which is their most defining characteristic. Now, the Fantastic Four has been tried on film a couple of times previously. Well, there were 3 actually, but the first movie never saw the light of day. The 2000s Fantastic Four film had an average reception, but it has picked up some nostalgia steam in recent years. And the 2015 film, which, yeah, let's try not and talk about that one if we don't have to. But seeing the recent trailer of the upcoming Fantastic Four got me hyped, and one of the main reasons is the look of the costumes. They're obviously leaning into the retro feel of the Fantastic Four that was present in the early comics in the 1960s. This mid-century modern style of the 1960s is the base of the look of the film, and I think it's going to fit it perfectly. The 2005 Fantastic Four suits were modern and good-looking, but pretty boring. And the 2015 Fantastic Four suits weren't even really suits. I mean, what the hell is this? Could they have made it any more boring?
What the hell is even that?
If anything, these new suits look closest to the unreleased 1994 versions of the suits. Now, like I said earlier, a lot is riding on this film. This film will be as important as the first Iron Man was back in 2008 to setting up the first Avengers movie. And I like what they've done with the Fantastic Four suits. Now, from what I can tell from the Superman trailer, DC is also leaning into this classic comic book costume look as well. Superman is one of, if not the first superhero, and his costume just may be the most recognizable of them all. The iconic blue with the red shorts and cape stands as a symbol of hope and strength, and the huge S on Superman's chest represents his home planet of Krypton. Superman has had a lot of films, and each one kept the look of the costume relatively the same. But from the Christopher Reeve Superman to 2006's Superman Returns to Henry Cavill's Man of Steel, the suit has lost its vibrant color and has gone for a more grounded, diluted look. But the suit in James Gunn's Superman is a definite callback to the Christopher Reeve Superman suit, with more color and bringing back the red shorts with a yellow belt on top. This film differs from the Fantastic Four in that it will be a totally new reboot for a totally new cinematic universe led by James Gunn's vision for DC. So the look of the suit for Superman and every other hero and villain in this movie will set the tone for the DCU going forward. And just like the look of the costumes in the Fantastic Four film coming up, Superman is leaning into the look of the early comics rather than a dark and grittier look that the previous installments have gone with. A lot of superhero costumes looked very goofy in the early days of comic books. Superman was based off of the look of circus strongmen of the early 20th century, hence the red shorts and boots. Comic books were sold on stands on street corners, so they had to be colorful and vibrant to stick out. And with these costumes, they were going for a look that people would be able to easily recognize and connect with as someone with exceptional strength and power. When these superheroes started to transition on television and films, they kept the costumes relatively the same. This was because fashion and the materials had not really changed a whole lot since the superhero suits were first designed on paper. And let's be honest, a lot of early comic book shows and movies weren't trying to be too serious. They were fine just being goofy and campy, which matched the costumes because they were bright and colorful and a little bit ridiculous, let's be honest. Over time, audiences were used to this, and anything comic book related in movies was seen as silly and not really to be taken seriously as a piece of cinema. Then eventually things started to change. There was a new renaissance of comic book movies, and studios were very eager to get in on this IP that they owned. And filmmakers looking to tell these stories wanted to tell them in a more serious and dramatic tone. And as the tone of these movies shifted to become more serious, so too did the costumes. Superhero films ditched the bright colored and unpractical to wear costumes shown in the actual comics and went for something more subdued and functional as a wardrobe, and also to not distract the audience. Now, this is not every comic book movie. Some still tried to keep the costumes as close as possible to the original, and this fit for some of the movies, but the overall look trended towards being more grounded and realistic. Now, all of this is great, don't get me wrong, it led to some great comic book films. I mean, the Dark Knight trilogy, Man of Steel, The Winter Soldier, Logan, these films are great. And these filmmakers set out to prove that comic book movies could be taken more seriously as a piece of dramatic art, and that's exactly what they did, and it led to the incredible run of comic book films that we just went through. But I think it's clear that that phase and style of comic book movies has run its course. So the only thing that studios can do at this point is either let the genre die out or change course dramatically. People like dramatic superhero movies, but they also like when they're just trying to be fun and don't take themselves too seriously. And that's why superhero movies going forward are going to lean more and more back into the look and feel of the actual comics. Bright, colorful, fantastical, funny, and not try and take themselves too seriously going forward. And personally, I think this is a much needed change to give some fresh breath into the genre and possibly revitalize the comic book movie genre moving forward. And just like I said earlier, how fashion comes in cycles, trends will come, be there for a while, disappear, be looked down upon later, and then years down the road are brought back. And just like every cycle, this cycle is going to apply to superhero costumes.